On the season, Western Carolina, they're 1-7, 0-6 in the SoCon. Don't have any Division One wins. The only win was over D2 Mars Hill in the season opener. As we all know, there's a lot of familiarity on that sideline. Their head man is Mark Spear. He was at Appalachian for the past 9 seasons, from 2003 to 2011. The last couple years, he served as the recruiting coordinator and the inside linebackers coach. So I do think he's going to get that program back on track. He's a great recruiter. He's got a lot of connections. Right now, he doesn't really have the horses that he'd like, but I think he will get them on track. He's been at Western before. He was assistant from 94 to 96, and that was when that Western program was in a completely different state than it is now. So he's been there. He's been a part of successful teams down in Cullowhee. And then he's also got 4 app guys on the staff as well. Brad Glenn's the offensive coordinator, Trey Elder, the wide receivers coach, John Holt, the offensive line coach, and Pat Mills, the tight end coach. So, there's a serious taste of Boone in that coaching staff over there in Western, and they're not going to be surprised by what we want to do. They're familiar with our offense, they're familiar with our players. But I do think there is a pretty significant talent gap there. Appalachian, we just have such an advantage in terms of recruiting at this point. We're farther ahead of so much farther ahead of where they are in that sense. And I really think that our depth, our speed, we're going to have an advantage on them. But that X factor, they're playing at home. They've got nothing to lose. Whereas for us, our backs are against the wall. We've got to win. There's a lot of pressure on us to win. They have absolutely nothing to lose, and they're going to come out as fired up as they've been all year. Coach Spear would like nothing more than the opportunity to beat Appalachian State in his first year in Cullowhee. There's nothing that would get that fan base more excited and be a bigger star on his resume than getting that win over us. So. It will be an interesting game, but like I said, I think we certainly have the advantage. But the familiarity factor and the fact that it is a historic rivalry, I think that it could be a little more interesting maybe than we'd like for it to be. But that they still, at this point, as this season has shown, they're still winless in the SoCon. I believe their Southern Conference losing streaks at 21 games. Obviously, they'd love to snap that streak against us, but they're still struggling right now. They're in a transition, and even though I do think Coach Spear is a very good coach, I think he was the right man for the job. He's still got some work ahead of him though.
Yeah, definitely, and I mean, I think the only reason why some of our fans are saying that it might be a trap game is because of that familiarity that they have with us, and then on top of that, for the most part. You can really throw everything out of the window when it comes to a rivalry game. I know it's pretty hard to call this a rivalry game from our side, considering we've absolutely dominated it. But in the same token, this is their rivalry game. They win this game exactly like you said. This is the only game they win all year. They're happy, especially with how their program is right now. So. I could see it possibly being a trap game, but at the same time, I don't think that there's any way that our guys are not going to be pumped up for this game. It kind of goes both ways. Yeah, we have a lot of old coaches on their team, but at the same time, our guys aren't going to want to lose to their old coaches. They're going to be just as pumped up. So it being in Cullowhee might give them a little more of an advantage, but not enough. The interesting thing, though, looking at this game, is that Western actually has the best red zone offense in the Southern Conference. They have a 90% efficiency. They've been in the red zone 29 times and have scored 26 of those times, 21 being touchdowns and 5 being field goals. The big difference with that, though, is the big plays. They only have 3 touchdowns outside of 20 yards, where App has 13. And something else similar with that is Western and App have actually been in the red zone the same amount of times, 29. Obviously, Western's better in being efficient in the red zone, considering they're number one. But App can score from deep a lot more often than Western can.
Yeah, that is true, and I do think that Western will score some points. I mean, they offensively, I think that they are good. They're a developing football team. They're very balanced. They average 366 yards a game, and their balance is actually pretty incredible: 178 passing yards per game, 188 rushing yards per game. So, they are gonna keep us on our toes a little bit. Whereas offensively for Appalachian, we average almost the exact same 186 rushing yards, and we're a more prolific passing offense, averaging 266 passing yards a game for 452 total. So we are our offensive numbers are a little bit more impressive than theirs, but they are very balanced. They're going to score some points. They've scored 31 points in each of the last two conference games. Those are against Elon and the Citadel. So they weren't the top teams in the conference, but those are both two teams that obviously Citadel took it to us, and Elon played a competitive game with us. So those are two opponents that should offer at least somewhat of a reasonable measuring stick for what we should expect on Saturday. They put up 31 points against the two of them. The big question for them is I just don't think that they're going to be able to slow us down. They're giving up 40 points and 514 yards per game. It's really tough to win when you're giving up that kind of production offensively. And, to be fair, it's not like Appalachian's been, shut down on defense either. We're giving up 420 yards a game. So it's not like we're out there bringing a dominant defensive unit into the game, but they've given up 40 plus in their last four games. They've, and five of the last six games, they've given up 40 or more. I mean, those 40 points and 514 yards would be even worse if they didn't open the year at the Division II school. So, they're giving up only 180 passing yards as opposed to 334 rushing. And as you'd expect, that stat's a little skewed because they've already played all three of the option teams in the conference. So, but they're, as much as I kind of want to be cautious and I want to say, oh yeah, this is a trap game. We need to be careful. Obviously, the players and coaches, they can't afford to look past this game. If they go out there and try to sleepwalk through this one, then Western definitely has the offensive ability to sneak up on you. I really don't see that happening. I truly feel that the two best games we've played all year, at Chattanooga and at home against Coastal Carolina, were the two games following that loss to the Citadel, and I'm really hoping that the team responds to this loss in the same manner they responded to the last one. They know that we can't afford another loss. They know we certainly can't afford a loss to Western if we want any chance to get into the playoffs. If we lose to Western, it doesn't matter if we beat Georgia Southern and Furman. We're not getting into the postseason. So I think that they know that fact is not lost on them. They know how badly that they want to beat us. They know all the familiarity on that sideline. But when it comes down to it, I just don't think Western has the horses. I just think that up front we're more athletic than them on both sides of the ball. I think that I think that Ronald Blair and Deuce Robinson are going to be able to get into the backfield and disrupt their passing game. And I think we'll be able to do pretty well against them in terms of stopping the run as well. And all that starts with up front. I just think that our front seven is going to win those. Is going to win those battles against their offensive line and their running backs trying to stop them. So anything could happen. Western Carolina does have some offensive ability. They've got some playmakers, but they're very young, and they just don't have the same caliber players as we do, especially up front. I do like their skill position players, but I just don't think they're going to be able to match up with us.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And one thing that I've actually find interesting about their skill positions, especially running back, is they have Michael Johnson, who's essentially riding the bench these days. And he was, if you guys remember, he was the Southern Conference Freshman of the Year back in 2009, I believe. So I mean, he's obviously got some talent. He had a lot of potential, and so now they obviously have two guys at least that at least the coaching staff sees that are better than him. So that could be huge, considering he put huge numbers up against us in his freshman year. I believe he ran over 100 yards and I believe 2 or 3 touchdowns on us. So he's very good, and he's at least from what I can tell stats wise is third string these days. So they obviously got a good solid core of running backs, and then with the balanced attack that they have, that's going to be hard to stop, just because we don't know what's coming at us. but at the same time, we're going to put so much pressure on them up front. Hopefully, with their offensive line being very young, being relatively small, just not a very good offensive line yet. I think they could definitely become very, very good, especially with the coaching staff that they have up there. But they're just, I think our front seven is just going to put too much pressure on them, especially if we have a healthy Brandon Greer coming back. I hope he's going to be healthy. I don't know. I saw him walking around on the sidelines after halftime, and he seemingly didn't have a limp. So I think he'll be back. I hope. But if not, like we talked about, Carl Anderson seems to be a good replacement for him. So I think our front seven is just going to be too much pressure, and they're just not going to give enough time to score enough to beat us. That's going to be the key. They're not going to be able to stop us on defense, so they're going to have to outscore us, and I just don't think they're going to be able to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Now they do, on the topic of their skill position players, they do present some interesting matchups in that regard. They use a two quarterback system. Eddie Sullivan and Troy Mitchell, both guys are dual threat quarterbacks. Eddie Sullivan has passed the ball a little more. He's got 164 passing attempts and just 82 for Troy Mitchell. He's thrown for 916 yards. Not a great ratio. He's got 4 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. But Eddie Sullivan's got 246 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and Troy Mitchell, who's kind of the secondary quarterback from a passing standpoint, is a huge threat on the ground. He's got 316 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. He leads the team in touchdowns on the ground, and they've got a good running back. He's a freshman as well, Darius Ramsey. He's got 389 rushing yards, only 1 score. But he's got the most carries on the team, the most yards on the team. He's averaging 4.8 yards per carry. So he's he is. He'll test us. They do have the skill position players that if our offense doesn't take them seriously and comes out flat, that they could definitely put some points on the board against us. And they have a kid that he's not quite at that that level of a Sean Price. I don't think from a pure talent standpoint. He's from Monty Edwards' hometown, Greenwood, South Carolina. Spearman Robinson. He is a true freshman. He's a big kid, just like Sean Price. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. He leads them in receptions with 36, got 357 receiving yards, only 1 touchdown, but he's having a nice freshman season as well. He's a talented kid, and so it seems to be kind of a common theme with them. With Spearman Robinson, Darius Ramsey, both those kids are true freshmen. Eddie Sullivan, he's a sophomore, and Troy Mitchell, he's a freshman as well. So they have 2 quarterbacks, the number 1 wide receiver and the number 1 running back, 3 freshmen and 1 sophomore. So they're a very, very young team as well as at some key positions, but they are talented. But as you mentioned, they've got a lot of work to do defensively, and I think really their only chance to win this game is going to be to outscore us. And if it comes down to a shootout, it's just offensive firepower versus offensive firepower. I like our chances against most anybody out there that doesn't have a strong defense.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And now I guess as part of our weekly tradition that we started, we're going to go ahead and give our prediction for this week's game in Colowee. And I'll go ahead and start. And Mike, as you and I talked about before the show started, Coach Dennis Wagner left Coach Spear with absolutely nothing to work with in Colowee, essentially. There's not much for Coach Spear to work with. His incoming class, he got a late start on recruiting, considering he was hired in the offseason. He didn't have all last season to recruit his guys to come to Western. So there's not much for Coach Spear and staff to work with out there. But that said, if App comes out slow again, as we have been doing the past couple of weeks, I think it's going to be a lot closer than most people think. But the Catamounts have basically our entire offensive staff in seasons past. So I know they're going to be ready for us. There's no doubt about that. Like we already said, this is their Super Bowl. They win this game and they have a good season regardless of however many wins they have. So they're going to be ready for us. However, Western, they just don't have the manpower to stay with us. The cupboard is empty, so to speak. So I'm going to say the Mountaineers come away with a 35-14 victory. and walk away with a pretty solid win.
Yeah,